Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Duffy and Nicholas coming to you on this beautiful Friday, going to explore the migration stuff that has changed. Oh, that was actually, I just remembered something. But anyway, I'm glad you're here.
Hey, so did we change the intro music? Because that was a banger.
It was definitely a banger. I definitely enjoyed it. If you're out there, say hello in the chat. Let us know that you're out there. Lovely to see our audience out there. It's just been a tremendous week. It's been really exciting seeing so many new CNCF ambassadors come online. Like the CNCF ambassadorship has just recently gone through a renewal of the organization of it, and now quite a few more ambassadors are showing up, including our very own Raphael.
Yeah, huge shout out to Raphael. Congratulations, man.
That's awesome. Just tons of good stuff. So let's jump into the news here. Let me share my screen. As usual, you can find this. Well, you will be able to find it in 1 second. 85. Okay, so you can find this at this link down here in the lower right-hand corner, HackMD Echo Live. I will also copy and paste it here in the chat. So if you would like to see our notes for this week, this is the way that you can find it. It has all of our notes for this week and previous weeks. And it's being weird. I can't scroll it. Let's see. Is that better? Ooh. All right, that's better.
There you go.
There's tons of stuff happening at Isovalent and Cilium and lots of other crazy things. We have the Isovalent events page. I would definitely like to point out there's a ton of really good stuff coming up. Actually, at the end of this month, on the 28th, I'll be doing an online seminar about Cilium technical deep dive, talking about how Cilium works at a low level. And that'll be really fun. We have a fireside chat coming up with Liz on her upcoming O'Reilly book, which I'm going to link here in a second as well. We have a workshop tour. It's happening all across Europe. Look at that lineup. Like Amsterdam, Berlin, Vienna, Helsinki, Copenhagen. Love it.
Oh.
Yeah. Lots of good stuff there. We have an event coming up in New York here pretty soon where I'll be doing a roundtable discussion about eBPF and Cilium and just lots of really great stuff happening in the space. So if you would like to come and see us in person, or if you'd like to get more involved, definitely come check out the events there. Lots of really great stuff happening there. Of course, we have our eBPF newsletter. And if you would like to subscribe to the newsletter, there is a link in the document that takes you to cilium.io/newsletter, where you can subscribe to our bi-weekly Echo News. Wouldn't it be bi-monthly?
That one always confuses me. Like, does bi-weekly mean twice a week or every other week?
I would love to. I mean, if we have an audience, I'd love to hear what they have to say about it. Because for me, bi-weekly is twice in 1 week. It's Eric.
I always thought it was every other week, but it makes sense. So yeah, every other week, twice a month.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Yeah, but that is actually how often it comes out, is like twice a month.
Yeah.
Anyway, and if you'd like to see the archive, here are all of the previous episodes or all of the previous versions, and the current one is number 27. So let's take a look at that one. Lots of great stuff, like as I said before, including the book, Learning eBPF, which is Liz Rice's latest book. It is out now. Get it before it's gone. You can just grab it from this link here. A deep dive into Cilium Gateway API, which is a new blog post that digs into what Gateway API is and how we are planning on using it, and some of the really cool examples of how all of this works, including some demos by our very own Niku Wilbert, showing how all of this stuff works. So if you would like to understand more about Gateway API and how we are planning on using it, definitely check it out. Very cool stuff. Chris Nova talking about Q, which is basically a Surface Linux networking metrics for eBPF. A collection of compiler.
Wait a second. I love that she just named it Q. She's like, I don't want to name it anything. Just screw it. It's called Q.
Who says naming is hard? Christopher Q.
I know, but I also am. It goes into my I truly hate one-letter names for things, particularly variables.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
I love it though.
All right.
Throws it out there. A case study in how Ascend leverages Cilium as a networking layer, Cilium for Kubernetes networking, why we use it and why we love it, from how Pollux switched from Funnel to Cilium. Wildly relevant. we'll be doing something very similar to that in today's episode. I think it's hilarious. The Cilium Con Europe 2023 schedule is up. And so if you're coming to KubeCon in Amsterdam, definitely come say hello. I'll be there. It will be great to see you. But Cilium Con is a new pre-event, pre-show event that happens on April 18th. We have some great end-user talks from Bloomberg, Robinhood, Sky, the New York Times, and Datadog. Just a lot of really great stuff. If you are attending, please, if you're gonna be there, please come and attend. Come say hello. We have a lot of really great stuff happening in that space. What else? Periscope and Grafana Flare joined together. That's an interesting one. The next acquisition in the eBPF ecosystem. We talked about a tutorial, getting started with Cilium Gateway API, writing an eBPF program using libbpf. Just lots of really great stuff, as I said before. So let's jump into a little bit more of the episode here. I did want to point out that there are some new labs, which I think are pretty exciting. There is a new lab on Cilium IPv6 networking and observability, a new lab on L7 load balancing with Kubernetes services and annotations, and then Cilium Enterprise Zero Trust visibility is a new lab as well. So if you want to check those out, check them out. A couple of them actually have badges. And as we pointed out last time, this is what the badge looks like. It's pretty cool. You can put it in your LinkedIn, that kind of thing. Nicholas has abandoned me. No, he's back.
Oh, I'm back. Sorry.
He's like, I don't want to hear about badges.
Yeah, I was like, this sounds too technical for me.
Right.
Sorry. My partner was talking on the phone rather loudly, so I had to close the door.
Oh. Your noise suppression stuff was working very well.
Oh, good. That's good.
All right. So let's talk about our setup here and jump into it. Yeah.
Hey.
It's like, that's not what I wanted. All right. So I'm using the same lab setup as I have in the past, which is that I'm using a cluster API on KubeVirt cluster. So if I do kubectl get clusters, you can see that I have a cluster called Calico OSS provisioned. Hey, Russell. Good to see you. And I'm going to actually, and let's take a look at that cluster real quick, see what we've got actually put on here. It'll get nodes. We have the cluster, we have 3 control plane nodes and 2 worker nodes, but we don't have anything deployed on it yet because there's status not ready. So it'll get pods-a. We can see that nothing has been deployed anywhere, including a CNI. Now this is a cluster API cluster. So I thought we would actually just kind of go to the cluster API docs, because in the cluster API docs for KubeVirt, quick start, they actually talk about how to deploy Calico. I'm actually planning on putting a pull request in here pretty soon for how to do this next piece. Cluster configuration, workload cluster. There we go. Yeah.
So they're following the same format of every other cluster API, which that part is way at the bottom.
Yeah. So this is the setup here. And I basically started walking through this. So I just wanted to kind of get us all on the same page about what's happening in this particular phase, which is that I have a KubeVirt cluster deployed, and I'm going to follow these instructions for deploying Calico CNI, and then I'm going to work through the process of migrating to the Cilium CNI. And, we'll probably also deploy some sample apps and show how those things work and that kind of stuff. But first, what I've done is I've grabbed the calico.yaml as described here at 324.4. And I've made some changes to this manifest piece, basically ensuring that the IPv4 CIDR lines up with the IPv4 CIDR of the cluster. And then I'm going to go ahead and deploy those components, and then that should actually get Calico deployed. So let's go ahead and jump into it here. I'm just going to close
one of the
this.
niceties of Calico, it's very easy to deploy.
Yeah. True for most CNIs. So
That's true.
Let's take a look at the Calicos.
But I will say, like, shout out to Calico, because I think they're the ones who really like pioneered the easy to install CNI.
True.
Because before that, like Flannel, oh boy.
I mean, that one's even easier though, because then you don't even have to worry about like CIDRs or any of this other business. I will probably die a Flannel fan.
Yeah, you'll die 1,000 cuts trying to troubleshoot Flannel.
There we go. So this is the IPv4 pool CIDR, and 243.0.0.16. And I just want to make sure that that's the right one for the cluster. So let's take a look at that real quick. kubectl get nodes -o YAML. Here at the top, 243 is the pod CIDR for this node, which means that 10.243/16 is probably the CIDR for the cluster. So
that sounds a reason.
We're lined up 10.243, 10.243. And that should mean that Calico should be able to deploy. So let's go ahead and try to deploy it. All right. One of the things, I think you and I know this pretty well, but I think in general, one of the things that people don't forget about is that one of the ways that you understand that your CNI is deployed and working correctly is that your core DNS pods come online and start working.
Yeah. And also something to know, like on that point, and something to look at is the logs for core DNS. Once they can make a connection to the Kate's API server, your CNI is working properly.
Yeah.
A thing that can be tricky is working with like a managed Kate service and making sure the core DNS can communicate properly.
Yeah. In fact, even in this KubeVirt scenario, I did have a problem because the way that it works. Oh, what is that? Oh, it came online right after.
Yeah.
Wherein core DNS was, where core DNS was coming online, but we'll talk about it here in a minute. But first, let's get this thing all deployed. But basically, what was happening was that core DNS by default is configured like this. Let's actually back up a sec. This is the configuration of core DNS by default. And you can see from this line right here, /etcresolve.conf, that what it's going to do is it's going to use the etcresolve.conf that it has access to do any resolution. And the way that Kubernetes is generally deployed that etcresolve.conf is a volume mount.
Yep.
It's because of the
What's going on? I didn't see what you're...
I'm trying to show why it's a volume mount, because it's not actually directly a volume mount.
Yeah, you're mounting a config mount.
We're not mounting it in. So how does it actually work?
Mm-hmm.
And that's this answer right here, which is the most horrible name for a DNS policy because it's not the default. But what this actually does is it makes it so that the etcresolve.conf of the underlying host is the resolve.conf that's mounted into the pod. So even though it's not a volume mount, the resolve.conf that the underlying host sees is the one that the pod sees. Now, this can be a problem if the underlying host has something like systemd DNS involved, right? Where like it's basically pointing at a loopback address, because the loopback address isn't going to be the same loopback address as the one on the host. And that was the problem I ran into with this KubeVirt stuff.
Ah, that makes sense.
But in my case, for these KubeVirt clusters to actually be able to resolve DNS, I had to edit the config map. Thusly, where instead of pointing at resolve.conf, I'm pointing at a specific name server.
Oh, I see.
Overriding the configuration by default and making sure that like that DNS resolution will work. All right.
Is this
Looks
a
like we have
KubeVirt?
one more time.
Is this a known issue for KubeVirt?
No, this is a known issue generally for systems.
Okay.
You know, it's like for the most part, people don't like if you have something that's doing like local DNS caching on the node layer, you have to be pretty careful about how core DNS is being handed that information, or it won't work.
Huh. That's the first time I've run that.
Yeah. I have been burned by it before.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, so let's see. Next thing I want to do, go pinger. So I've deployed Goldpinger here in a daemon set that I'll apply to all nodes, and also as a deployment so we can scale it up and down. And all of these things right now should be getting IP addresses from the Calico stuff. So if I were to take a look at one of these pods, for example, get pod Goldfinger, CF, show YAML, I look up here at the top, then I'll be able to see telltale signs of our friends at Calico.
Mm-hmm.
This is information that the Calico CNI annotates all pods with, right? The pod IP or the pod IPs, all that information. So these pods are up and working. They're part of the Calico network. If I were to kubectl, how would that work?
You want to like ping something else?
Trying to think of like kubectl get svc. Oh, cool. 1095, 203, 203.
A slightly suspicious service name, their service IP.
Then behind a load balancer. 10, 244, 1.91. Yeah. I'm not on that network. How do I get myself on that network?
So wait, walk me through what you're trying to be able to ping that service?
I wanted to curl it. Mm-hmm. And I could do it from, I guess, from inside.
You could exec into like another Goldfinger node or something like that.
Yeah, but at the moment, basically, with KubeVirt, it's on a network that I'm not necessarily a part of.
Right.
Because it is a part of the... RCTL show. what I'm thinking about is like in the KubeVirt case, when that network is created, the network that stuff is associated with has to be reachable somehow. I'm trying to figure out like how that is actually mapped in, but I'm not going to dig into that very far. So for now, let's go ahead and just prove that Goldfinger is working. So let's do kubectl, run it, bash, image equals bash. Bash. Kubectl exec ti-n bash. Okay, update. You have network connectivity. DNS is working. Okay, add curl. And then we could do like env. We could do curl. Goldfinger.sbc. Actually, default.sbc colon 8080. So we think we have things working. We're able to get responses back.
Okay, looking good.
Yeah. There is actually a path that I want to hit with this. Let me figure out what that is real quick.
I did not know that Goldfinger was created by Bloomberg.
It was actually. It's very
That's
cool.
pretty cool.
Very cool.
I saw the license. I was like, wait, what?
Check all. All right. So this is output. And we can see what this is doing is it's basically giving us a textual representation of connectivity tests from each of the Goldfinger pods to all of the Goldfinger pods, right? Showing us like what the host IP address is, showing us what the pod IP address is, showing us that we have connectivity from each one of these individual pieces to all of the subsequent others, right? So it's a full mesh connectivity view.
Yeah.
And we can see everything. And we can also see
cool.
that we just did check. That would actually be kind of a smaller one because it's actually only just showing you from the node that we actually landed on, which, what can it reach? And it can reach everything. All the status codes are 200. So we're in good shape. Things are working.
Nice.
And of course, we've proven that we have curl, google.com, right? We have DNS resolution, all that stuff works. So we have a working cluster. Everything is happening. And now let's talk a little bit more about what we're planning on testing today. So before I get into that, real quick, I do want to point out that I do have there was a previous episode where I did a migration from flannel to, there we go, Multis and Cilium. I think that's the one. So this episode is another migration episode. And it's a really interesting one because we do the same thing, but we go about it in a different way. And I'm going to go ahead and link that here. previous migration episode. In that previous migration episode, we use Multis to do this work, where we deploy a flannel cluster, we deploy Multis, we deploy Cilium, and then we do a migration from flannel to Cilium, leveraging Multis instead of doing this entirely with Cilium. And in this case, what we're actually going to be testing is new code that is in the Cilium CLI, or in the Cilium product, that enables us to actually handle this migration case just with the code in Cilium itself.
Yeah, which is really, really nice. Like not having to like go through the steps of Multis and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is in the 113 open source release. Yep. So this is some brand new stuff.
And so let's walk through the docs here real quick, and then what we'll do is we'll just kind of start getting into it and showing how it works for migrating from Calico to Cilium. So what's described here is that Cilium can be used to migrate from another CNI. Running clusters can be migrated on a node-by-node basis without disrupting existing traffic or requiring a complete cluster outage or rebuild, depending on the complexity of the migration case. So in some cases, it may actually be more of a hit than other cases. But if what we're doing is just node-by-node migration, then this actually enables us to do that in a way that allows us to do it. In this case, we're going to be doing a test. We're going to be migrating all of the workloads on given nodes in a node-by-node case, right? So we're going to go through the 3 control plane nodes, then we're going to go through the worker nodes, and then the 3 control plane nodes. There are a couple of different requirements, right? One requirement is that we have a new distinct cluster CIDR, which means the IP addresses being handed to the pods have to be distinct from the IP addresses already handed to existing pods. So that CIDR 10243 that has been allocated to Calico has to be a different CIDR than the one that we're going to hand to Cilium. And the reason for that is because there are two different effectively overlays here. And for you to be able to route traffic between the two of them, there can't be any overlap between the two.
Which, I mean, that just makes sense, right? Like, how would anything know how to route to anything if they're sharing the same IP address space?
Exactly. Another requirement.
I think Cilium should be able to know the difference, right? Because it's like identity based. I guess it's not identity based routing, but it knows like specifically like the IP addresses to route to those pods versus like how kubeproxy may do it. But still, it's a little messy if they're overlapping.
What's tricky though is that like basically, if they were all the same CIDR, the problem is that the underlying Linux kernel, which is handling all of the routing, wouldn't really know where to send traffic for one CIDR or the other. And this is exacerbated by the fact that both CNIs are handling IPAM independently of one another.
Yeah, that was one. I was like, I just realized I was like, it's probably a big IPAM problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if on the same node, you might be allocating the same IP space to both overlays, which would make the conflict even harder to resolve.
Yeah.
A distinct overlay, either protocol or port, and that means that in the Calico case, I think we're leveraging VXLAN, or maybe we're not. I'd have to look at it. But in the way that Calico is deployed, it will have picked some particular overlay model. I think by default it uses IP and IP, but I'm not sure actually how it's configured here. I think in the configuration change they moved us to VXLAN. And so if you're going to move from one CNI to another CNI and they both use the same overlay protocol like VXLAN or IP and IP or whatever, then the challenge is that you have to make sure that the protocols don't conflict with one another. And typically this is just a different port. Like both sides could be VXLAN, but you have to configure one side or the other to use a different port so that the VXLAN daemon or the VXLAN process can actually run twice on the same node.
Right.
We have a question from a LinkedIn user. Also, hello, Sadiq in Dubai. Nice to see you.
Hey, Sadiq. Really quickly, Ramadan Mubarak, if you're observing.
Nice. So the question from the LinkedIn user is, what is chain mode? And as a quick high-level view of what chain mode is where you have an existing CNI. This is actually pretty common in like AWS, where you're making use of the AWS EKS CNI. And then you want to be able to use features or functionality from another CNI. Say, for example, you want to turn on all the observability that Cilium offers, but you don't want to change out the existing CNI that's managing all of that ENI stuff for you. So you can deploy Cilium in a chain mode, which means that the AWS CNI handles all of the VETH creation, it handles all that ENI business, handles all the IPAM, and then it hands the endpoint that was created to Cilium, and Cilium registers it as an endpoint and can implement things like network policy and observability and all of those pieces, enabling both CNIs to do their job independently of one another. Now, in our case, in Cilium's case, we actually can operate in two different modes in AWS. We can do that chain mode thing, or we can also actually just handle all of the ENI stuff for you directly, which is pretty cool. So what else are our limitations? If you're using like a pretty advanced setup, like a BGP-based routing or changing IP families from 4 to 6, or migrating from Cilium in chain mode, or if you have an existing network policy model that's in heavy use, all of these things can really complicate the migration. So in our case, we're probably not going to explore too much of that. But if you have a simpler use case like that, it can work pretty well. So the overview is going to be to install Cilium in a secondary mode, to cordon, drain, and migrate, reboot each node, remove the old network provider, and then reboot in each node again if we need to. In this example, they're leveraging Kind, but I'm just using a KubeVirt cluster for it. We've already deployed Goldpinger to show connectivity. We're going to select our new CIDR. We're probably going to use 10.244 because I think 10.243 is the existing. And then we have some example configuration here, which is basically, this is actually pretty interesting stuff. So these are the values that are being passed to Cilium to do the install. And let's walk through what these are real quickly, because I think some of them are pretty interesting. What these values do is they handles particular features of Cilium so that we don't conflict or mess up the existing CNI until we're ready to do so, right? This unmanaged pod watcher here, its job is to determine if there are pods deployed inside of your cluster that are not under Cilium's management. And if there are, then we restart them. We don't want that to happen automatically right now, so we're going to turn that feature off. We're going to set the tunnel encapsulation to VXLAN. We're going to move to a non-default VXLAN port. We're enabling custom configuration to true, which means that we don't want to lay down the CNI configuration until we explicitly tell the system to do so. And we're not going to uninstall an existing CNI configuration on shutdown. Here's where we're passing the new CNI CIDR that we're going to use. We're going to disable policy enforcement because we don't want to mess with any existing policies that are in place. And then we're also going to turn on host legacy routing, which enables pods in two different overlay networks to communicate with one another, because we're relying on the Linux's routing table to figure that out.
So it looks like you answered one of the questions from LinkedIn user.
Yeah. Is a service able to load balance traffic between? Yes, I think that will be able to work.
I believe that should work, yeah.
But we're gonna show that, or we're at least gonna try it live because we do it live. That's how we do it.
Yeah, heads up for everybody. I've not tried this myself, so this is all new to me too. I am your surrogate.
Should be fun to go. So here we have our setup. And so they go through the step of deploying Cilium. They go through the step of this new feature which is the Cilium node config. This is the mechanism by which we can configure Cilium to lay down and take over a node, or lay down the configuration and take over a node when the time comes. And then we go through the process of migrating node by node and restarting things. And then in post-migration, we can remove the older CNI. And also turn on the, unmanaged pod watcher, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get into this piece of it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to deploy Cilium. Here is our values. This is that configuration that we were just looking at. I'm using the 10245 slider for the new pod slider. And then I'm going to use a feature of the Cilium CLI, which is documented in that document.
Also, really quickly, just to go back, what is the previous CIDR? Can you get that really quickly?
10243.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to, for the purpose of demonstration, be like, hey, look.
Yeah. Keep get pause -o wide.
10243.
10243. So these are all on the Calico side. So I have copied these into a file called values initial, and I'm going to go ahead and run this command, and we'll take a look at what it does. This is a pretty cool feature of Cilium, in my opinion, but let's take a look at what it does. It's not going to actually do any installation at this point. What it's going to do instead is it's actually going to create a new file that includes values configuration or values initial.yaml. But what's happening here is that we're detecting what's actually happened, right? So we are going to install Cilium version 1.13.1. We've detected that the cluster's name is Calico OSS. We've detected that data path is type tunnel. That kubeproxy is being installed, so we're not going to replace it. And then we're going to go through and populate those values that we know about and any values that we also care about that we're going to change. And that will give us our values initial YAML, which looks like this. And so in this case, in this model, this is everything that we need to do to configure Cilium directly. So I'm now going to do the install part. Cilium install. Helm values initial. Oh, you know what? Forgot something.
What's that?
Well, I forgot that the Cilium CLI also does a restart of unmanaged nodes, and I didn't disable it. So here in a second, it's going to restart everything anyway. But there is a way to actually disable that in the CLI, and I just forgot to do it.
So really quickly, while we're waiting for this, so one thing I noticed was that we said the VXLAN like port, right? And so Calico is also running in a VXLAN overlay, right?
Let's verify that.
Yeah. So because something like, are we using the same board? That might not be good.
Please. All right, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
This is enabling VXLAN by default. We don't specify a port in the VXLAN configuration.
So there it is. Yeah, it's VXLAN port is a option.
but it doesn't say what it is by default. So
Yep.
Kernel exec, let's do Kate's. One moment. Get nodes. Root.
Hack one, but
Okay, so what this does, it could be a little shady, I guess, when you think about it. But what this is doing is just that one-liner. I actually have stickers for this one-liner.
is this NSEnter?
This is the one-liner, on my
Yeah.
Twitter, which is basically a one-liner that allows you to have root access to the underlying node, right? So we could do IP route. We can see all the Calico stuff. We could see everything working in the Calico world, etc. And then we can also see, what was it? Oh yeah, that's LNU. Here is these actually.
Yeah, one of those is the one that we are setting up, though, right?
Yes. So one of those is 4789 is probably the Calico one, and 8473 is the one that we created in our configuration.
Yeah. I know 8473 is for sure us.
Yeah. And 4789 is the default VXLAN port, which I think that Calico is using for its configuration. But because these are basically just, protocols that the kernel is wiring up, we're not going to see it associated with a daemon. But we have two UDP ports, both listing on UDP, IP. Yeah. So at the moment, we have our setup, and we just restarted a bunch of pods. But if I do go ahead and do kubectl get pods -o wide again, we can see that we're still sitting on 10.243. And if we do our curl command again, run it, bash, bash. Here default.svc:8080/check. APK add JQ. Curl gold configure. Check JQ dot. So we can see that all the things are working. Something like this. We're just doing a grep first, status code 200, and then just to prove that this is actually doing something useful, I'm going to split this horizontally, put that up there. You see that go to 9. And then when it gets replaced, we'll see it come back to 10. Did you see that happen?
I'm sorry, I was looking I was looking at the VXLAN defaults.
Weren't even watching. Oh.
I did find that the default for Calico is 4789.
I think that's actually true of VXLAN in general. Let's do kubectl rollout restart deployment.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. So up here, I have basically a curl against Goldpinger service doing the check command, pipe to JQ, and then grepping for status code 200. And right now I have 10 of these Goldpinger instances running, and so I'm seeing 10 instances of 200. But if I restart the deployment, I'll see that drop pretty significantly.
Yep.
Now it's down to 9. We should see it drop even more. It's recovering very fast. So fast, the recovery. All right.
Yeah, well, hey, the power of Kubernetes.
Image is already present. It takes no time to start it back up. So. All right. Here. So, yeah. So now we have get pods -a. So now we have Calico deployed, and we have Cilium deployed, and we have all of the things using Cilium or using Calicos. Sorry, my bad. Get pods -oy. They were all still on that 10.243 subnet. So the next step for us to do is to go ahead and start playing with the Calico stuff. Yeah. Sorry, the Cilium stuff. I think I'm slightly over-caffeinated.
Oh, it's a thing. I only ever have 2 cups anymore in the morning.
Fair enough. So, in our docs, the next step is to create a per node configuration. Which is this piece right here. And what this is going to do is it's going to configure the Cilium node config. It's going to put this configuration in the kubesystem namespace where Cilium is deployed. And it's going to create an object called Cilium default. Further, it has a node selector watching for a label on nodes that's called IO Cilium migration Cilium default true. And when it sees that, it's going to do these other things by passing additional configuration to the Cilium agent that will ensure that Cilium can take over the configuration of that node. It's going to say where to write the Cilium configuration, host SECNI netd 05 Cilium conf list. It's going to disable Cilium custom CNI conf. It's going to ensure that CNI chaining mode is none, and it's going to mark CNI exclusive true. So let's go ahead and create this object. Actually, Cilium node config.
So yeah, you can do this in multiple nodes if you want by setting that node selector label to true for all of the nodes that you want to switch over. So you don't have to do it just like one at a time, but probably should.
Well, in this model, basically what's happening is that the premise is that we're going to label the node that we want this to apply to.
Right, exactly.
And that way you could label multiple nodes at a time.
Yeah.
But in our case, we're just going to do one at a time to prove that things work.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I was like, you could do it multiple at once if you wanted to, but like, gonna be honest, I think one at a time is probably the safest. While you're doing that, Marcos from YouTube says, "Hi, friends. Hello." And Ben Lopez from LinkedIn said, "Nice webinar."
How's it going, Marcos?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. There's a ton of really great content on eCHO. There's a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and start this up. Let's do kubectl label node. One of these worker nodes here. And then we're going to set our label to match the label that is in our selector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought Marcos, or Jed, I thought that was you.
Oh,
I wasn't sure. Yeah,
I always forget that you do that. Yeah,
I know. I'm pretty sure this is Jed, but I wasn't 100%.
It always gets me. How is the wild land of Colorado, Jed? What I want to do next is I want to jump into this node and see if things have changed.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another step before I do that. Well, actually, still, it's valuable to do that. So I'm going to jump into this other tab here, actually. You can see at the moment this is still a Calico node, even though it has to match. It doesn't match the label. Nothing's changed about the node yet. So if we come back over here and we look at the documentation, our next step is to do this stuff where we cordon and drain the node, and then we're going to reboot the pod, the Cilium pod, on that node. So let's go ahead and work through that step.
I just had a random thought. Can you cordon based on label?
I think so, yeah.
You can. I never tried, but you can. So presumably, like if you're doing multiple of these, like if you're doing like a batch, for every one that's like true, you could set it to cordon, if you wanted to. There's probably a better way of doing that, actually, because probably I'd use a different label, actually.
So then the next step in our documentation is to reboot that one pod, which is identified by this piece. And then we'll do a get pod. Let's see here. Up.
Okay. I do that too. You're running, by the way. Yeah.
What?
Oh, the press enter, up and enter, up and enter. I know you can do a follow or a watch, but I'm just like,
all right.
I like this better.
Okay.
Well,
Now,
look at that.
For this node specifically, I'm just doing a Cilium status on the Cilium agent deployed on this specific node. and we see this output saying CNI config file, CNI configuration file successfully written to host etccni netd 05 Cilium conf list. And that Cilium is operating there. So let's go ahead and jump in. Oh, that's funny. Let's go ahead and jump in and see what that looks like.
Oh, because it's got the comma at the end.
Comma.
See, Cilium IPAM, it has a trailing comma for no reason.
Cool.
Yeah, I just saw it. I thought that's what you're talking about. You said that's funny. I was like, what?
All right. So we're back on our node here. We haven't rebooted anything yet, but we're back on our node. inetd. We see the Cilium 05 Cilium conf list. And that means that because of the way this is configured currently, that means that any new pod deployed on this node will actually make use of the Cilium configuration, not the Calico configuration. We could show that. It'll get pods. It'll get nodes. Right now, it's ready, but scheduling is disabled. If we were to do kubectl, actually, if we were to do kubectl how do I want to do this? I want to prove that I can deploy a pod on this node and that it will get an IP address from the new setter.
I would, yeah, you can just uncordon, or you can force a pod to ignore scheduling disabled.
Actually, the hack1 pod that I was just using over here.
Mm-hmm.
The hack1 pod is actually a part of the regular overlay network, and it got a 245 address, and it's on that A and BJJ.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, yeah. Because then, yeah, it ignored the scheduling disabled because it's a priority pod.
In fact, if I do this pod, oh yeah, and 245.
Yep. Great.
All right, so we're seeing that on that node, on 8N BJJ, we're now allocating Cilium pod, or Cilium addresses. So now, the interesting question is, if I were to pull that specific, or any of them really, if I pull that Goldfinger test that we did before, what would happen?
Mm-hmm. I don't know how you can keep these terminals separated in your brain without like a physical delineator.
It's because I'm dyslexic.
Oh. What?
So we're still seeing all 10 available to us.
Which is great. Like, that's amazing.
So at the moment, that means if we were like look at this more verbosely, I guess is one way to say it. And we can see that from the node we're on, we're able to reach all the 10244 IP addresses. And to check all. $245. So we're able to see connectivity from 10.244 from a 10.244 host or from a 10.243 pod IP, not just to itself, but also to something in the 10.245 network right here, status code 200. So this is showing us that the question that the LinkedIn user had earlier, which was like, once we're in this hybrid state, will we be able to route traffic to an endpoint behind a service that is across both? The answer is yes.
Yep. Obviously, like if you're, a single loaded pod, like, or if there's like only one way to get into that pod, or whatever connections that are available for that one pod, as soon as you reboot it to get the new IP address, those will be dropped. Like if you're going like directly to that one, but like for most applications, this is like you'll see like zero downtime throughout this. It's just a normal pod churn.
Exactly. So at this point, the next step in our migration is to go ahead and to continue with this node. There's a lot of cleanup stuff that we have to do, right? Because this node right now is still sitting in a world where it's running Calico and Cilium at the same time. And so I think at this point, what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go ahead and uncoordinate. I'm going to continue in this process. And then I'm going to remove the Calico once I have everything working. And then we're going to do reboots at that point.
Cool.
So let's go ahead and keep going. So far, we've proven that in this migration state, we can actually have connectivity work, even in a case where the cluster is in this mixed state, which is really cool. So kubectl uncordon node.
So LinkedIn user asks, what component is involved in routing between the two CNIs? It's just the CNIs.
Meaning, how is traffic moving back and forth between the two sides? The way that would work at the moment, let me just jump back into the node here. This is actually a function of the node itself. So because we have turned on the host legacy routing, it means that we have this mechanism. This is what the routing table looks like on this node. And in this routing table, we can see traffic, excuse me. We can see routes for all of the Calico stuff, and we can also see routes for all of the Cilium stuff. Right? And so when that traffic from a pod in the Calico network tries to reach another pod that happens to be in the Cilium network, then the destination for that traffic would be a part of the 10.245 network, and it's just being routed at the host layer over to whatever node is hosting that particular traffic, or to that particular pod.
Yep. So and I think we're still in queue proxy replacement is disabled, right, in this mode?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So IP tables is now it just picked up the new IP address for the endpoint, and then is using the IP routing table that Duffy's showing here to facilitate the actual routing. But IP table should show you the new IP address.
Yeah. So this is the service for Goldfinger, and these are all of the pods that Goldfinger has running in all of these places, right? So we can see in this output that we have a bunch of 10.243 addresses, and we also have some 10.245 addresses. Right, all behind the same service.
Cool. I think that's about it.
All right. So let's keep going.
Yeah.
You know what I'm curious about?
What?
Okay. Never mind. Listen, we're gonna go. All right. Let's keep going. So we're gonna go on to the next node. We're gonna keep doing our label thing, and then we're gonna keep rebooting nodes, and then we're just gonna kind of work through all of our nodes and do the whole thing. And so we've already done kubectl get nodes -- show labels. So this one, and it's a terrible way to see this. IO. I'll get nodes -L Cilium migration. Have that one node done. Let's go ahead and mark all of the rest of them. And for our purposes, because I'm kind of pressed for time a little bit, I'm just going to do all of the nodes. Let's get wild. Label.
This is production safe. Go ahead and do this.
Okay.
Narrator, he was kidding. Don't actually do this in production. Don't do all of your nodes all at once.
A lot of debugging risky.
It's a lot of it's called a, what is it? Stampede. Like a raging stampede.
It'll roll out, restart, daemon set, -N, cube system, Cilium. Oh, sorry. Outside voice.
You know me, I always use my outside voice. That's why I can't go to a library anymore.
Fair point. You know what? I want to change this query. I want to change this query to 10.245. What this query is now doing is it's actually, besides making me flip out, because there we go, that's better.
Yeah, there you go.
So, what this query is now doing is actually telling me how many of the nodes are in the 10.245 network.
I see. And so as the restart rolls out, that number should go up.
All right, looks like Cilium is now completely deployed. So honestly, if you're going to do a migration from Calico to Cilium, there's a lot, or actually any CNI to any CNI, there's a lot involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I would recommend, though we document this in our docs and we make it, our intention here is to describe that it is possible, not necessarily easy.
Yes,
so
yeah.
If you are going to go down this path, I would say definitely reach out and, work with us to figure out the best way to go about this so that you're not trying to do this on your own.
Yeah.
But in any case, I would also say that really and this is actually, you might be asking why I'm talking like this, but this is a question from a LinkedIn user. Are there some specific Kubernetes or Calico version requirements for the migration tool to work? So yes, you have to have the most recent version of Cilium 1.13 at the moment is where that code exists. But I was also kind of expanding on the fact that if you were going to do work like this, it's important that you kind of understand what you're getting into here, because as though I make this look easy, but it's really not. I wish it were easier than it is. And we're making it easier as we go, but fundamentally there's a lot of risk involved when changing CNIs.
Yeah, this is a complicated process that has been made much easier, but it's still a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
But the other question, part of the question was is there a Kubernetes version or Calico version? And we don't actually care, to be honest. For us, for this migration tool, you just need to be using Cilium 1.13 and above for this particular thing to work. And the migration tool isn't really a migration tool. This is just Cilium. That's just part of the code base now. Exactly. So it's Cilium doing this.
And so in my testing, I've gone ahead and just redeployed the Goldfinger deployment. Mm-hmm. And now I have 6 nodes that are operating on the 245 network.
You gained a node?
So I can now see that I have more of the pods are sitting in the 10.245 network, and fewer of the pods are sitting in the 10.243 network. Because what I've done is I've gone ahead and labeled all of the Cilium agents, and I've gone ahead and made that migration step happen across the set. And now we're in this hybrid mode where any new work that gets deployed is going to get deployed onto the Cilium CNI. Let's go ahead and do scale, deployment, Goldfinger, replicas, 15. We can see that as these new ones get created, they're going to come up under Cilium.
Yeah, now we're up to 12. 15, there we go. 16.
So any new work is on the Cilium side. Any existing work is on the Calico side. If I restart anything that's on the Calico side, it's going to get put on the Cilium side. So now we're in this really happy migration state where everything can reach everything between the two, and we can kind of control what happens over time. Now, there's still a bunch of stuff in here that is Calico related, right? So we need to kind of like finish up and clean up and make all that happen. So let's go ahead and make that happen now.
Sounds good.
And then we'll be in a good place.
Yep.
So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to, determine like what things are still on the Calico side. These are all the things we have running that are on the Calico side or on the or that are on the Calico subnet. We can see that some of those things are Goldfinger pods. There's the Calico cube controllers. Our core DNS configuration is still sitting there in the Calico side. Let's go ahead and fix that core DNS configuration. So kubectl, rollout, restart, dash n kube system deployment core DNS. Okay, core DNS is now on the Cilium side. We still have a few Goldfinger pieces, which are actually a part of our daemon set. And I'm just going to go ahead and restart the daemon set to make sure that happens, right? So kubectl rollout, restart daemon set, Goldfinger. What we have left is our bash pod and the Calico cube controller stuff, both of which I don't really particularly care about. So what I'm going to do is at this point, now that everything is on the Cilium side and things are continuing to work, right? We still have connectivity. 20 pods are up. They're all on the Cilium side. I'm going to go ahead and remove Cilium. Or sorry, no, that would be a terrible idea. I'm going to go ahead and remove Calico.
I really wish we'd picked a name that didn't start with C. I keep doing it too.
Good times. Okay. So this is, you may recall, the Calico YAML that I used to install Calico in the beginning.
Whoa. Let me see. Still got 20 pods are running.
And now, in theory, we can see that Calico is no longer a part of our cluster.
Mm-hmm.
But,
let's
go back over to our node here. And if I do IP route, I can still see a bunch of Calico stuff in my routing table.
Yeah.
And I can still see that the VXLAN interface, IP link I still have that VXLAN Calico interface up. And so this is where the reboot comes in, right? Because I want to be able to remove those things that I don't need in the that I don't want to have in there for the I need to clean up all of that stuff. I don't want to leave it around. So the next thing I'm going to do here is actually go back to the docs. There is one more step here in the finish step here, which is the post migration, where we have done all of the work. We're going to go ahead and apply this. And what this is going to do is, because now at this point, everything's on Cilium, nothing's on Calico. What we're going to do is reconfigure Cilium so that it knows that it is the default across the board. We're going to turn off this. We don't need necessarily to do this like per node host configuration anymore, because we're through that part of we're through that phase. So I'm going to go back over here and then apply this piece. And here we have our final configuration with everything in it. So I'm going to do Cilium upgrade. This is probably where it won't quite work the way I expect. But let's see. Values. Yeah. All right. Well, I should have used Helm for this, but I didn't. So what I'm going to do, let's take a look at this.
Because the Cilium install just does the manifest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you just template out, just do a Helm template, get the manifest, and just apply those directly?
Because the manifest doesn't. I suppose I could do that. It's currently okay. Yeah, that worked. Good point. Nice catch, Mr. Nicholas.
Thank you. Because that's all Helm is actually just doing, is just do.
Exactly. Yeah. That's pretty slick. All right. So now we've done all of our work. The last thing we have to do is basically we can go ahead and reboot all of our nodes, right? We have everything. We have everything else we need. So keep get all get nodes. I am going to go ahead and reboot this node and show that that works. So I'm going to do reboot. You should see the 8.9 BGJ one become unavailable. If I was kinder, I probably would have done a cordon and a drain, but I'm kind of mean, in the so there we
It's a
go.
benefit of being a power user.
Rebooting. What'd you say?
It's a benefit of being a power user.
Exactly. I like to play whack-a-mole. It's like my favorite game. So we're waiting for this node to come back up, and then we'll jump in and we'll take a look around and see if it got cleaned up.
While we were doing that, Jed a while back said that Colorado would be great if spring ever started. Dog, tell me about it.
Oh man, big mood.
Yeah, spun up a fresh instance of Tetragon. Happy to see the way it's grown. Love to hear it. Yeah, Tetragon has gotten very slick and also very easy to install.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, you guys in California, your spring is never going to start, it seems.
My goodness. We've actually almost had like a fall spring a couple of times, and I'm like, just make it happen.
I know. It was really like nice and sunny this weekend, and I was like, don't fall for it. This is a period in the Northwest we call Fool Spring.
Yeah. Is this node going to come back?
Nah.
Come on, little buddy. Oh. Oh. I thought I was almost back for a second there. Starting to get some action, I think.
Yeah, something's happening.
In the meantime, let's do this. This will be kind of fun. Scale. Machine deployment. Oh, wait, I have to go back into the scale machine deployment. Replicas. 3. Machine deployment. Scale machine deployment. Replicas 3. It came back. Woo!
Hey.
All right, so let's jump into it now. I know that. Happy route. No critical stuff.
Very cool.
I wonder if this will happen here. And we still have the backups. These are still here. Probably can clean those out at some point. No critical stuff. All done.
That's awesome.
All right. And so with that reboot, now we can do kubectl get pods -o wide. And we can see that there are some stuff on the 8N BJJ stuff that is running. And we have all of the things working, and our migration is effectively complete.
Yep. Looking good.
And we have a new node because we scaled it, right? Now we have 3 worker nodes and
Yes.
three control plane nodes. And so to finish this up, what we would do next is we would go through and reboot all the rest of the nodes, but obviously that would take more time than I want to spend on this particular show. But you get the idea of how all of this works, and it all just works. You know,
Yeah.
simplicity is hard, they say, and I think that's true.
Yes. It took us 13 versions of Cilium to get to this point.
Yeah. So super exciting. I'm hopeful that you found this episode interesting, and that this is something that you might that might give you the confidence to think that this is something that could be done, right? And so if you're in a situation where you're running some other CNI, doesn't matter what CNI it is, and you're interested in migrating to Cilium, reach out. Let's see what we can do together.
Yep, because like blue-green deployments aren't always possible. Actually, a lot of times they're not possible, right? So having this ability to do like a seamless transition, while still complicated but significantly easier than it used to be, is great. It's really cool to see.
Exactly.
Yep. But I'm Soggy on Slack, on the Cilium Slack. So if you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me there.
And I'm at Maui Lion everywhere.
That's good. I should probably have done that too.
See y'all soon. And if you're all coming to Amsterdam or anywhere like that, do reach out. I would love to see you there. And we'll see you all next time. Take care.
See ya.
I gotta do the exit music. Here comes the banger music again.
Yeah. Yeah.